Close your eyes. Imagine the smell first, because in the Hippodrome of Constantinople, smell is the first thing that hits you. Animal dung. Rotting meat thrown to beasts. Human sweat from 100,000 bodies packed into stone tiers. Sawdust soaked with blood and wine and worse. The acrid tang of fear. Now add sound, the roar of the crowd, constant as ocean waves, punctuated by screams of excitement, of dying animals, of condemned criminals being torn apart for entertainment. This is the Hippodrome, the heart of Byzantine Constantinople, the largest stadium in the world, where politics, religion, sport, and slaughter converge into spectacle. But we're not in the stands. We're beneath them, in the tunnels where performers, animals, and prostitutes wait in darkness before their cues to entertain the masses above. And here, in the shadows, is a child, 4 years old, maybe 5, gripping her older sister's dress with one small, dirty hand. Her name is Theodora. This is where empresses are made. The factions. To understand Theodora, you need to understand the Byzantine circus factions. These aren't just sports teams. They're political parties, street gangs, religious movements, and social identities all rolled into one. There are 4 factions, but 2 dominate, the blues and the greens. They support different chariot racing teams, yes. But they also represent different social classes, theological positions, political allegiances. Blues and greens riot in the streets. They murder each other over race results. Emperors rise and fall based on which faction supports them. Theodora's father, Acacius, is the bearkeeper for the green faction. This is a significant position, not prestigious, but essential. The Hippodrome needs bears for beast fights, for executions, for entertainment. Acacius manages them, feeds them, controls them. It's dangerous, filthy work, but it keeps his family fed. And then Acacius dies. Suddenly. Disease, accident, murder, the sources don't specify. What matters is the result. His widow is left with 3 young daughters and no income. The desperate gambit. Theodora's mother remarries quickly. Another bearkeeper. Survival in Constantinople requires pragmatism, not mourning. But there's a problem. The new husband has connections to the blue faction, not the greens. And the green faction officials who control the Hippodrome appointments don't transfer Acacius's position to him. They give it to someone else entirely. Theodora's family is suddenly destitute. Her stepfather has no official position, no income, 3 young girls to feed. And in Byzantine Constantinople, there are limited options for women in poverty: begging, prostitution, or the stage. Often all 3 simultaneously. So Theodora's mother makes a plan. A desperate, brilliant plan. She dresses her 3 daughters in mourning clothes, black, ragged, the costume of supplication. During the next major festival, when the Hippodrome is packed with spectators, she sends the girls into the arena during an intermission. They're to kneel before the green faction's seats and beg for charity. Plead for the bearkeeper position to be given to their stepfather. Picture this: 3 little girls, the oldest maybe 8, crossing the vast expanse of the Hippodrome floor. The crowd of 100,000 watching. The green faction officials in their box seats, surrounded by luxury, looking down at these begging children. The greens ignore them completely, won't even acknowledge their existence. But the blues, the rival faction, the traditional enemies of the greens, they take pity. Or see opportunity. They call the girls over. Promise to help the stepfather get a position with the blue faction instead. Theodora is too young to understand the politics. But she learns a lesson that will define her life. Loyalty isn't blood. Loyalty is to whoever shows mercy when you're powerless. She will be blue faction for the rest of her life. And when she becomes empress, she will remember which color banner saved her from starvation. The Hippodrome education. Theodora grows up in the tunnels beneath the Hippodrome. Her childhood is performances, always performances. First as part of a children's acrobatic troupe, tumbling, dancing, entertaining crowds during intermissions between races or executions. She learns to read audiences, to sense when a crowd is turning hostile, to know which gestures get applause and which get pelted with food. She learns that survival is performance, that your body, your smile, your ability to please strangers is currency. The Hippodrome is not a safe place for children. It's not a safe place for anyone. Performers die in accidents. Animals maul handlers. Riots erupt without warning, and anyone in the arena can be trampled or torn apart by mobs pouring onto the sand. But it's also an education unavailable in any palace or school. Theodora is learning about power, about how crowds think, about the performance of authority, because she watches emperors enter the Hippodrome, sees how they manipulate mass emotion through gesture and timing. She's learning how the world actually works, stripped of the pretense that shelters aristocratic children. She sees senators visiting prostitutes in the back corridors, sees holy men drunk and violent after races, sees the gap between public performance and private reality. She's 8, 9, 10 years old, and she already understands what most people never learn. Everything is theater. Respectability is costume. Power is performance. She just doesn't have any power yet. She's still at the bottom, still surviving day to day, still one accident or illness away from complete destitution. But she's watching, learning, waiting. Theodora is 15, maybe 16. The child acrobat has grown into a young woman. And in the Byzantine entertainment world, that means a transition from one kind of performance to another. She becomes an actress. In Constantinople's theaters, actress is synonymous with prostitute, not metaphorically, but legally. The law classifies them identically, pornai. They have the same legal status, the same lack of rights, the same social condemnation. Byzantine theater is not subtle. It's not Shakespeare. It's body, sexual, often explicitly pornographic. Mythological scenes performed with heavy erotic content. Actresses appear nearly nude, simulate or perform sexual acts, play to audiences of drunk men who see them as objects available for purchase after the show. This is Theodora's new world. And she's about to become famous. The performance. The story that defines Theodora's early life, the story her enemies will repeat for centuries, is her rendition of Leda and the Swan. In Greek mythology, Zeus disguises himself as a swan to seduce or rape, depending on interpretation, Leda. It's a common mythological scene, performed in various ways by Byzantine actresses. But Theodora's version becomes legendary, notorious. Our source for the details is Procopius, the Byzantine historian who wrote 2 accounts of Justinian and Theodora's reign, one official and laudatory, one secret and viciously hostile. In his Secret History, written to be published only after everyone involved was safely dead, Procopius describes Theodora's performance with evident disgust and possible arousal. She would appear on stage wearing almost nothing, a garland here, a strategically placed cloth there. She would recline on the stage floor. Servants would scatter barley grain across her body, her stomach, her thighs, between her breasts. And then they would release the geese. Not swans, budget constraints, presumably, but geese. Trained geese who would peck at the grain, their beaks and necks moving across Theodora's nearly naked body in ways that suggested, well, the audience understood the suggestion. The crowd would roar, cheer, and Theodora would perform, eyes closed or locked on the audience, face expressing ecstasy or boredom or practiced pleasure, whatever sold the scene. the reality beneath. Let's be clear about what's happening here. This isn't liberation. This isn't sexual freedom. This is survival through commodification of flesh. Theodora is performing sexuality for audiences who see her as subhuman. Byzantine law denies actresses the right to marry citizens of rank, the right to legal protection from assault, the right to testify in court except under torture. They are infamous persons, stripped of basic rights. The performance doesn't end when the stage goes dark. Actresses supplement their income through prostitution. Some have pimps. Some work independently. Some are essentially enslaved by theater owners who control their contracts. We don't know Theodora's exact situation. Sources suggest she was relatively independent, that her beauty and fame allowed her to choose clients, to charge premium prices. But relatively independent, in this context, still means profound vulnerability. Still means no legal recourse if a client becomes violent. Still means social death, condemnation by the church, contempt from respectable society. Picture the dressing room after the performance. The geese removed. The costumes stripped away. Theodora counting coins, tonight's take, calculating how much goes to the theater owner, how much she keeps, whether it's enough to cover rent and food and clothes and the bribes necessary to avoid arrest on morality charges. The roar of the crowd is distant now. In the silence, she's just a young woman in a cold room, smelling of sweat and bird droppings and the cheap oil they use for stage lighting. She's famous. She's desired by thousands. She's also profoundly alone, trapped in a life that offers no exit. Because once you're classified as infamous, once you're legally a whore, there's no path back to respectability. No aristocrat will marry you. No respectable family will acknowledge you. You're outside the social order permanently. Unless you're Theodora. Unless you're smart enough, ruthless enough, lucky enough to rewrite the rules entirely. But that's ahead. For now, she's performing. Night after night. Year after year. Building a reputation that will make her both famous and unmarriageable. The geese, by the way, become a symbol. For the rest of her life, Theodora's enemies will reference the actress and the geese. Even when she's empress, even when she's the most powerful woman in the world, they'll whisper about the geese. About what she did for coins in a theater. She'll never escape it. But she'll learn to weaponize it. To own the shame before others can use it against her. To turn degradation into a kind of armor. But first, she has to survive. Theodora is in her early 20s now. She's been performing for years. She's famous in Constantinople's entertainment district. Men desire her. Women despise her. She's made more money than most actresses ever see. And she's exhausted. Not physically, though the work is draining, but existentially. She's smart enough to know this can't last. Actresses age out. Beauty fades. Younger performers replace you. And then what? Poverty. Disease. Death in a gutter. She needs an exit strategy. And she finds one in the form of a man named Hippodrome. The escape. Hippodrome is a Byzantine official, middle-ranking bureaucrat who's been appointed governor of Pentapolis, a region in North Africa, modern-day Libya. It's a significant promotion for him. A chance to enrich himself through the standard corruption of provincial governance. And he wants Theodora to come with him. Not as a wife, he can't legally marry an actress. But as his mistress. His concubine. She'll live in the governor's mansion. Have servants. Wear fine clothes. Leave the Hippodrome and the theaters and the endless performances behind. Theodora accepts. Of course she accepts. This is the best offer she's ever going to get. A chance to escape Constantinople. To live in comfort, even if it's dependent on male favor. To be something other than an actress whore. They board a ship. Sail across the Mediterranean. Theodora watches Constantinople recede behind her, the massive walls and domes shrinking to nothing. She's leaving the only world she's ever known. Leaving her mother, her sisters, the familiar streets and theaters and tunnels of the Hippodrome. She's 20-something years old and starting a new life. It should feel like liberation. It feels like a different kind of trap. The illusion. Life in Pentapolis is better than the Hippodrome. Materially, at least. Theodora has her own chambers in the governor's residence. She has clothes that aren't costumes. She has food that isn't scavenged from theater leftovers. She has servants, people who bow to her instead of propositioning her. But she's still property. Seduced owns her as surely as any pimp owned any prostitute. She exists at his pleasure. And the sources suggest that Seduct's pleasure is cruel. We don't have details. The ancient historians who mention this period are frustratingly vague. But they consistently describe Seduced as brutal, violent. The relationship deteriorates quickly. Maybe he beats her. Maybe he shares her with political allies. Maybe he just loses interest, the way men do when the novelty of a famous actress mistress wears off and she's just another woman in his household. What we know for certain is this: Seduced throws her out. Literally. He ejects Theodora from the governor's residence, cuts off her support, leaves her stranded in Alexandria, where the ship stopped on the return journey to Constantinople, with no money, no connections, no way home. The nadir. This is Theodora's lowest point. She's in a foreign city. She doesn't speak the local dialects. She has no resources. She's been discarded like garbage by a man she foolishly thought might offer security. She's back to survival prostitution. But worse than Constantinople because she doesn't have her reputation here, doesn't have established clients, doesn't have the fame that at least commanded premium prices. She's just another foreign prostitute in Alexandria's markets, selling herself for enough to eat, to rent a corner of a room, to survive one more day. Picture her in the narrow streets of Alexandria's slums. The North African sun turning the stone to fire. The smell of spices and sweat and desperation. Men propositioning her in languages she barely understands. Coins that don't buy as much as they should. The knowledge that she's right back where she started, except worse because now she's older and she knows exactly how bad it can get. This is where most women in her situation disappear from history. Die of disease. Vanish into slavery. Become statistics rather than stories. But something happens in Alexandria. Something that changes everything. The conversion. Theodora encounters the Monophysite Christian community. Monophysites are considered heretics by the official Byzantine Church. They believe Christ has one divine nature rather than two natures, divine and human. The theological debate seems abstract, but in the Byzantine Empire, theology is politics. Religious affiliation determines loyalty, determines protection, determines survival. The Monophysites in Alexandria have a network. They support each other. They offer refuge to the displaced and desperate. And they offer it to Theodora. Did she genuinely convert? Experience authentic religious awakening? Or did she recognize the political utility of religious patronage and perform conversion as skillfully as she'd performed everything else? Probably both. Theodora is smart enough to see opportunity, but she's also desperate enough to genuinely need the community, the protection, the sense of purpose that religion provides. She joins the Monophysites, attends services, studies scripture, builds relationships with bishops and monks and wealthy donors. And slowly, painfully, she accumulates enough resources to book passage back to Constantinople. She's returning, but not as the actress who left. She's returning as a Monophysite convert, a reformed woman, someone with powerful religious connections. She's returning with a plan. Because Theodora has learned something crucial during her time in exile. Dependence on men is a trap. The only security is power. And power in Byzantium flows through two channels: political office and religious authority. She can't hold office, she's female. But she can access religious authority. Can build a network through the church. Can position herself not as sexual object but as pious patron. The ship carrying Theodora back to Constantinople is also carrying a completely new performance. The greatest performance of her life. She's going to seduce an emperor. Not through geese. Through God. Constantinople, around 522 CE. Theodora is back. Harder. Smarter. Approximately 30 years old, middle-aged by Byzantine standards, ancient for an actress. But she's not performing anymore. She's survived. She's learned. And she's about to meet the man who will make her empress. His name is Flavius Petrus Sebaceus Justinianus. We know him as Justinian, and he's the most unlikely romantic lead in Byzantine history. Justinian is in his late 30s, maybe 40. He's the nephew of Emperor Justin I, and because Justin has no legitimate sons, Justinian is heir presumptive to the Roman throne. But he's not what you'd expect from an emperor-in-waiting. He's not a warrior. He's not charismatic. He's a bureaucrat, a legal scholar, a theological obsessive who spends hours debating the nature of Christ with monks and bishops. He's awkward socially, sleeps very little. Contemporaries describe him pacing the palace at night, working on legal codes, reforming tax systems, planning architectural projects. He's celibate by reputation, utterly devoted to his work and his religion. He's also, according to sources, not particularly attractive. Medium height, balding, round-faced, the kind of man aristocratic women smile at politely and forget immediately. This is the man who's going to become obsessed with Theodora. The meeting, how they met, is frustratingly unclear. Ancient sources either don't know or deliberately obscure it because the truth is too scandalous. One tradition suggests Theodora performed at a private party Justinian attended. Another suggests mutual friends introduced them. A third implies she deliberately positioned herself to encounter him, using her Monophysite religious connections to gain access to imperial circles. What's clear is this: Justinian sees Theodora and becomes completely, utterly fixated. She's beautiful, certainly. But Constantinople is full of beautiful women. She's intelligent, more educated than most aristocratic women, with street smarts developed through decades of survival. She's experienced sexually, knows how to please, how to seduce, how to make a man feel like the center of the universe. But it's more than that. Justinian is surrounded by sycophants, people who tell him what he wants to hear. Aristocrats performing deference, bishops seeking favors. Theodora doesn't perform deference. She's too old, too experienced, too exhausted from a lifetime of performing to bother with one more act. She's genuine, or as genuine as anyone can be after 30 years of surviving through performance. And Justinian, who spent his life in the artificial world of the imperial court, finds her authenticity intoxicating. The obsession. They begin a relationship. Not marriage, legally impossible. Justinian can't marry an actress. Byzantine law explicitly forbids it. But they live together. Openly. Scandalously. The court is horrified. Justinian is heir to the throne, supposed to marry some princess or aristocratic woman who'll bring alliance and respectability. Instead, he's moved a former burlesque performer into his residence. His aunt, Empress Euphemia, Justin I's wife, is particularly opposed. Euphemia was herself a slave before Justin freed and married her. She knows exactly how the aristocracy treats low-born women who marry above their station. And she's determined to prevent Theodora from experiencing the same humiliation. She forbids the marriage. Absolutely. As long as Euphemia lives, Justinian cannot marry Theodora. So they wait. Justinian and Theodora, living in sin, scandalizing Constantinople, while Euphemia grows older and sicker. And during this waiting period, something happens. Justinian falls deeper. This isn't just lust. This isn't a phase. Justinian genuinely loves Theodora, or is obsessed with her. The line is blurry. He consults her on political decisions, brings her to meetings with advisors, treats her like a partner, not a concubine. This is unprecedented. Imperial mistresses are supposed to be decorative and silent. Theodora is neither. She gives opinions, argues with his advisors, demonstrates political intelligence that surprises and impresses him. She's read legal codes, understands theology, can discuss governance with the same sophistication as any senator. Justinian is discovering that he doesn't just desire Theodora. He needs her, her intelligence, her pragmatism, her ability to see through the performances everyone else is putting on. The waiting. Years pass. Euphemia holds on, growing frilier but refusing to die. Theodora ages. She's in her early 30s now. The window for childbearing is closing. The possibility of legitimate heirs, if she could somehow marry Justinian, is fading. But she's patient. She's survived this long by reading situations, by waiting for the right moment, by not forcing things prematurely. And she's building, using her position as Justinian's acknowledged mistress to cultivate relationships. She's patronizing Monophysite churches, supporting bishops, building a network of religious and political allies who owe her favors. She's preparing, because Theodora knows that when Euphemia dies, there will be a brief window, a moment when marriage becomes possible. And she needs everything in place to move fast before Justinian's advisors can organize opposition. She's playing a long game, and she's very, very good at it. In 523 CE, Empress Euphemia dies. The obstacle is removed, but the law remains, and Justinian is about to do something unprecedented to overcome it. He's going to rewrite Roman law. For a woman. For Theodora. The year is 523 CE. Empress Euphemia is dead. The personal obstacle to Justinian and Theodora's marriage is gone. But the legal obstacle remains absolute. Roman law forbids senators from marrying actresses. And Justinian, as heir to the throne, holds senatorial rank. So he does something that will define his reign. He changes the law. The constitutional crisis. This isn't a minor reform. This is constitutional revolution. The Roman legal code is considered sacred, inherited from classical antiquity, refined over centuries, the foundation of civilized society. Emperors don't just change laws on personal whim, especially not laws about marriage and social class. But Justinian is not a normal emperor. He's a legal reformer obsessed with rationalizing and codifying Roman law. He's already planning the Corpus Juris Civilis, the comprehensive legal code that will define European law for a millennium. And he's about to use his legal expertise to create the world's most elaborate prenuptial agreement, a law specifically designed to let him marry Theodora. The legislation Justinian proposes is brilliantly crafted. It doesn't say, Justinian can marry Theodora. That would be too blatant, too personal, too obviously corrupt. Instead, it's framed as moral reform on actresses who wish to reform their lives. The law states that actresses who have genuinely repented of their former profession, who have abandoned the stage and embraced Christian piety, who have demonstrated reformation through their conduct, these women can be restored to legal respectability. The stain of infamous status can be removed. and once removed, they can marry senators. The law is suspiciously specific. It requires public demonstration of repentance, abandonment of the theatrical profession, embrace of Christian piety, imperial approval of the Reformation. In other words, it's written exactly for Theodora's situation. She's left the stage. She's publicly Monophysite Christian. She's demonstrated Reformation through years of living with Justinian in a chaste, officially, relationship. And the emperor, Justin I, under Justinian's influence, will approve her specific case. The Senate reacts. The Senate is horrified. This is degradation of ancient Roman dignity. The law that separates respectable citizens from the unworthy is being erased to enable one man's sexual obsession with a whore. But they can't stop it. Emperor Justin I supports his nephew, and Justinian controls the imperial bureaucracy. The law passes. The aristocracy fumes. They'll remember this. They'll never let Theodora forget what she was. But they can't prevent what happens next. The wedding. 525 C. Justinian and Theodora marry. Not secretly in a chapel somewhere. Publicly. With full ceremony. In the Hagia Sophia, the old church, not the one Justinian will build later. Picture the scene. Theodora, former actress, former prostitute, woman legally classified as infames just years earlier, standing at the altar of Constantinople's greatest church. Wearing silk and gold. Priests chanting. Incense obscuring but not quite masking the contempt of the aristocratic witnesses. Justinian beside her, awkward, balding, utterly besotted. Holding her hand like she might disappear if he lets go. The ceremony proceeds. Vows are exchanged. The marriage is legal, binding, irreversible. Theodora is now Justinian's wife. When Justin I dies and Justinian becomes emperor, she will become empress. The former geese performer is one heartbeat away from the throne. The calculation. Let's be clear about what just happened. Justinian didn't just marry Theodora. He rewrote the fundamental laws of the Roman Empire to make it possible. Think about the implications. Justinian is so obsessed, so in love, so convinced he needs Theodora that he's willing to trigger constitutional crisis, alienate the Senate, scandalize the aristocracy, and fundamentally alter Roman legal tradition. This is power used for personal desire on a scale that's almost unprecedented. Augustus created laws to control marriage. Justinian created laws to enable his. But here's the question: who's using whom? Ancient sources, particularly Procopius, claim Theodora seduced Justinian through witchcraft, demonic sexuality, manipulation. That she's controlling him, puppeting him. Modern interpretations are more nuanced. Yes, Theodora is intelligent, strategic, skilled at reading and influencing people. But Justinian isn't stupid. He's one of the most brilliant legal minds in history. More likely, they're partners. Genuinely. Justinian provides political power and legal authority. Theodora provides political intelligence and ruthless pragmatism. They complement each other. He's the theorist, she's the practitioner. He dreams, she executes. And they're about to get the chance to prove it. Because in 2 years, Emperor Justin I will die. And Justinian will become emperor. With Theodora as his empress. April 4th, 527 CE. The Hagia Sophia. The great church of Constantinople, filled with incense and chanting and the concentrated power of the Byzantine Empire. Justinian is being crowned emperor. But that's not the unprecedented part. The unprecedented part is happening simultaneously. Theodora is being crowned Augusta. Empress. With exactly equal ceremony, exactly equal rank, exactly equal imperial authority. This is revolutionary. Byzantine empresses exist. but they're usually consorts, secondary to their husbands. Theodora is being crowned as co-ruler, partner in power. The woman who performed with geese is about to wear the purple of divinity. The ceremony, the coronation ritual, is ancient, sacred, terrifying in its symbolism. The emperor and empress aren't just political rulers. They're God's representatives on earth, chosen by divine will, semi-divine themselves. The Patriarch of Constantinople places the crown on Justinian's head. Then, in the same ceremony, with the same prayers, he crowns Theodora. Holy oil is applied. Prayers are chanted in Greek and Latin. The crowd, aristocrats, senators, generals, all the people who despise Theodora, perform proskynesis, prostration. They lie face down before her, acknowledging her as empress. Theodora stands there, crowned, robed in imperial purple, the color worth more than gold, reserved exclusively for the imperial couple, and watches the aristocracy grovel before her. Every person who called her whore, every senator who opposed her marriage, every aristocratic woman who refused to acknowledge her, all of them, faces pressed to marble, submitting. The contrast. Let's pause and feel the absolute surrealism of this moment. 15 years ago, Theodora was performing with geese for coins. Men paid to watch her simulate bestiality. She was legally non-human, denied basic rights, classified as property. Now those same men, or their brothers, fathers, colleagues, are prostrating themselves before her, calling her Augusta, Empress, God's chosen, kissing the hem of her robe. The same body that was available for a few coins is now untouchable, sacred, worthy of worship. This is the most complete reversal in Byzantine history. And Theodora knows it's precarious. Knows that if Justinian dies, if she loses power, the aristocracy will tear her apart. They're prostrating now because they must. But they hate her. Remember her past. Wait for her to fail. She can see it in their eyes even as they bow. The contempt, the rage, the barely suppressed desire to see her fall. The power. But Theodora isn't worried about their hatred. She's weaponizing it. Because fear is more useful than love. And the aristocracy is absolutely terrified of her. She's the emperor's partner. She attends council meetings. She reads state correspondence. She influences appointments. Justinian consults her on everything from theological disputes to military strategy. This isn't decorative empresshood. This is actual power. And Theodora uses it immediately. She starts building her apparatus, a network of spies and informants separate from Justinian's official bureaucracy. She needs to know what the aristocracy is saying about her, what plots are forming, who's dangerous. She establishes a secret police force, agents who report directly to her. She creates unofficial channels of power that run parallel to the official state machinery. And she starts identifying enemies. The first targets. Within months of the coronation, people begin disappearing. Not obviously, not en masse, but quietly, carefully. An aristocrat who spoke too freely about Theodora's past is arrested on unrelated charges. A senator who opposed her marriage finds himself accused of corruption. A bishop who preached against actresses is transferred to a remote diocese. The pattern isn't immediately clear, but it's there. Theodora is systematically removing anyone who threatens her position or refuses to accept her authority. She's not killing them, usually. That would be too obvious. Instead, they're exiled, imprisoned in her private dungeons beneath the palace, or forced into monasteries. They disappear from public life, and no one quite knows why. The aristocracy gets the message. The empress has a long memory. And she's more dangerous than the emperor. The performance. But here's the genius. Publicly, Theodora performs perfect piety. She attends church services. She patronizes monasteries. She dresses modestly by imperial standards. She presents herself as reformed Christian empress, devoted to her husband and her faith. The contrast between public Theodora and private Theodora is total. Publicly, the saint. Privately, the enforcer. And the aristocracy can't reconcile it. They can't decide if she's genuinely reformed or brilliantly performing reformation. They can't tell where the actress ends and the empress begins. That uncertainty is her greatest weapon, because it means they never know what she's actually thinking, what she's actually planning, what will trigger her displeasure. Theodora has spent 30 years performing. She performed sexuality in theaters. She performed piety for Monophysites. She performed love for Justinian. Now she's performing empresshood. And the performance is so complete, so convincing, that even hostile historians can't entirely see through it. But the performance is about to face its greatest test. Because 5 years into their reign, the empire is going to burn. And Theodora is going to have to choose, run or rule. The Nika riots are coming. Before we reach the flames of the Nika riots, we need to understand the machinery Theodora built. Because when the crisis comes, when Constantinople burns and Justinian wants to flee, Theodora will survive through the network she's constructed in shadow. The parallel state. Justinian has his official government, the Senate, the bureaucracy, the Praetorian prefects, the legal apparatus. Public, documented, functioning through established channels. Theodora has something else, a shadow state, unofficial, undocumented, running through channels that don't appear in any organizational chart. She has spies everywhere. In the Senate, reporting on debates and private conversations. In the aristocratic households, reporting on family disputes and financial troubles. In the monasteries and churches, reporting on theological arguments and political allegiances. In the brothels and taverns, reporting on what common people are saying about the imperial couple. Information flows to Theodora constantly, and she uses it ruthlessly. The dungeons. Beneath the great palace of Constantinople, there are cells. Secret prison chambers that don't appear in official records. Theodora's private dungeons. When someone becomes a problem, spreading rumors about her past, plotting against her position, refusing to accept her authority, they don't get public trials. They vanish. Guards arrive at night. The person is taken to the palace. And they disappear into Theodora's dungeons. Not killed, usually. That would create martyrs, scandals, investigations. Instead, detained indefinitely. No charges. No trial. No communication with family. Just imprisonment until they're broken, until they agree to recant whatever offense triggered Theodora's displeasure, until they're no longer a threat. Some emerge after months, chastened and silent. Others stay for years. Some never emerge at all. The sources, particularly Procopius, describe these dungeons with horror. Secret chambers where Theodora's enemies are held without legal process. Where torture extracts confessions. Where people are broken psychologically rather than physically, which is somehow worse. The disappeared. Procopius, in his Secret History, lists specific cases. Names of aristocrats who offended Theodora and vanished. A senator who joked about her theatrical past. Gone. A noblewoman who refused to bow properly at a court ceremony. Gone. A bishop who preached about the importance of virginity in empresses. Transferred to a desert monastery so remote he might as well be on the moon. Are these accounts exaggerated? Probably. Procopius hated Theodora with the burning intensity of an aristocrat who despises uppity low-born women. But even if we discount half his claims, what remains is significant. Theodora ran a parallel justice system. She punished enemies outside official channels. She used fear as a tool of control. The contradiction. Here's where Theodora becomes impossible to categorize. She's running secret prisons while simultaneously founding women's shelters. She's disappeared political enemies while rescuing prostitutes from brothels. She's torturing confessions from aristocrats while protecting rape victims. The same woman. Simultaneously. Without apparent contradiction. Modern psychology would struggle to classify this. Is she a psychopath? A pragmatist? A survivor doing whatever's necessary to maintain power? A reformer who understands that protecting the powerless requires being ruthless with the powerful? All these? None of these? Maybe the question itself is wrong. Maybe Theodora doesn't think in terms of morality at all. Maybe she thinks only in terms of power and vulnerability. Crush those who threaten you. Protect those who can't threaten you. Use both to build networks of fear and loyalty. The control of Justinian. How much does Justinian know about Theodora's shadow state? The sources disagree. Some suggest he's completely unaware, that Theodora operates independently, that she hides her activities from him. Others suggest he knows but doesn't want to know, that he deliberately doesn't ask questions, maintains plausible deniability, allows Theodora to do the dirty work he's too pious or too squeamish to handle. Most likely, he knows. And he approves. Because Justinian is building an empire. He's reforming law codes, reconquering lost territories, constructing churches. He's dreaming of restored Roman glory. And empires require violence, require suppression of dissent, requires secret police and disappeared enemies and networks of informants. Justinian does it through official channels, tax collectors, military commanders, legal prosecutions. Theodora does it through unofficial channels, spies, dungeons, midnight arrests. They're partners. Complementary. He builds the visible empire. She maintains the invisible machinery that keeps it running. The wait for crisis. 5 years into their reign, Theodora's shadow state is complete. She has eyes everywhere. She has detention facilities for enemies. She has networks of informants and enforcers. She's built a system of control that operates completely outside official Byzantine governance. And she's about to need it. Because in January 532 CE, Constantinople is going to explode. The Nika riots, the worst civil unrest in Byzantine history, are coming. And they will test whether Theodora's network is strong enough to save an empire, or whether the shadow state collapses when exposed to the light of actual revolution. January 532 CE. The Hippodrome. Chariot races as always. The blues and greens, as always, cheering for their teams, hurling insults at each other, waiting for an excuse to riot. And then something unprecedented happens. They stop fighting each other and unite against the emperor. The cry starts as a cheer, Nika, Nika, victory. But it transforms, becomes a rallying cry. A revolution condensed into one word, Nika. And Constantinople begins to burn. The causes. The Nika riots don't start spontaneously. They're the eruption of accumulated rage. Justinian's tax policies are brutal. He's funding wars to reconquer the Western Roman Empire, Italy, North Africa, Spain. He's building massive churches. He's reforming the entire legal system. All of this requires money. Enormous amounts of money, which means taxation that's crushing the empire's economy. His legal reforms have alienated the aristocracy. He's centralizing power, reducing the Senate's influence, appointing low-born bureaucrats over noble families. His religious policies have fractured the empire. Orthodox versus Monophysite. Constantinople versus the eastern provinces. Theological disputes that are actually political disputes in disguise. And there's Theodora, the empress who rose from the gutter, who represents everything the aristocracy despises: social mobility, disruption of ancient hierarchy, low-born power. All of these tensions have been building, and on January 13, 532 CE, they explode. The spark. Justinian has ordered the execution of several rioters from previous disturbances, members of both the blue and green factions. The executions go wrong. Some of the condemned survive the hanging, are taken to a monastery for sanctuary. Justinian orders them rearrested and executed properly. The blues and greens, normally bitter enemies, unite in outrage. This is violation of sanctuary. This is tyranny. The chants begin during the races at the Hippodrome. Nika! Nika! The crowd surges. The mob pours out of the Hippodrome and into the streets. And they start burning. The 5 days. The riots last 5 days. 5 days of chaos that nearly destroy Constantinople and end Justinian's reign. Day 1. The mob burns the Praetorium, city prefecture building. The fires spread. Justinian sends troops to suppress the riots. The troops are overwhelmed. Retreat. Day 2. The fires are spreading. The Hagia Sophia, Constantinople's greatest church, burns. The baths of Zizippus burn. Half the city center is in flames. The mob is demanding Justinian's abdication. Day 3. Senators join the riot. The aristocracy sees an opportunity. They proclaim a rival emperor, Hypatius, nephew of a former emperor, more acceptable than the low-born Justinian and his whore empress. Day 4. Justinian's control is collapsing. His guards are outnumbered. His advisors are panicking. The mob controls the streets. Hypatius is being crowned in the Hippodrome. Day 5. The day of decision. Justinian and his council meet in the palace. Constantinople is burning outside. They can hear the mob, smell the smoke, feel the empire crumbling. The Council of Despair. Picture the scene, the imperial council chamber. Justinian surrounded by his advisors. The greatest generals of Byzantium, Belisarius, Narses, others. The highest officials. And Theodora. The advisors speak unanimously: flee. Escape while there's still time. Ships are ready in the harbor. They can load the imperial treasury, sail to Thessaloniki or even to the eastern provinces. Preserve the dynasty. Regroup. Return with armies. Staying means death. The mob will storm the palace. Justinian and Theodora will be torn apart or burned alive. The reign is over. Better to live in exile than die here. Justinian is convinced. He's a legal scholar, not a warrior. He's terrified. The advice makes sense. He gives orders to prepare the ships, load the treasure. They're evacuating. And then Theodora speaks. The speech. Procopius, despite his hatred of Theodora, preserves her speech. Because it's too famous, too politically significant to omit. And because even he has to admit, it's magnificent. My opinion is that now is a poor time for flight, even though it brings safety. She's looking directly at Justinian, at the generals, at the advisors who think she's just the emperor's whore, irrelevant to real decisions. Every man who is born into the light of day must sooner or later die. She's calm. Everyone else is panicking, and she's absolutely calm. And how could an emperor endure to be a fugitive? May I never be separated from this purple, and may I not live that day on which those who meet me shall not address me as empress. This is the core. She's been powerless. She's lived in the gutter. She's clawed her way to the throne through decades of degradation and survival. She's not giving it up, not running, not going back to vulnerability. If you wish to save yourself, O Emperor, that is easy. For we have much money, and there is the sea, here the boats. She's giving him permission to flee, not judging him. If he wants to run, he can run. However, consider whether after you have been saved you may not come to feel that you would have preferred to die. The challenge. The question, what kind of emperor runs? What kind of man abandons his throne when it gets dangerous? As for myself, I approve a certain ancient saying that royalty is a good burial shroud. Royal purple is the noblest shroud. She'd rather die as empress than live as a fugitive. The silence. The council chamber is silent. Everyone is looking at Theodora. This woman they despise. This former actress. This prostitute who shouldn't even be in the room. And she's just shamed every man present. Shamed the generals who fought in battles. Shamed the advisors who consider themselves brave. Shamed the emperor himself. Because she's right. If Justinian flees, he's finished. He'll be emperor in name only, ruling from exile, trying to reconquer his own capital. He'll be remembered as the emperor who ran. The coward who abandoned Constantinople. Better to die fighting. Better to stay and suppress the rebellion, even if it means death. Justinian looks at his wife. This woman he rewrote laws to marry. This woman who's been his partner through 5 years of ruling. And he makes his choice. They stay. They fight. They win or die. Theodora has just saved the empire. The decision is made. They're staying. But staying means fighting. And Justinian's forces are outnumbered. The mob controls Constantinople. Hypatius has been crowned rival emperor in the Hippodrome. They need a strategy. Brutal. Decisive. Theodora's shadow state is about to become visible. And it's going to be soaked in blood. The plan. 2 men step forward, Belisarius and Narses. Belisarius is Justinian's greatest general. Brilliant military commander, loyal absolutely. He has a small force of veteran troops, barbarian mercenaries, mostly, who don't care about Byzantine political factions. Narses is a eunuch chamberlain, one of Theodora's agents. Smart, ruthless, politically cunning. And he has something Belisarius doesn't, gold. Lots of gold. And knowledge of how the circus factions work. Together, they develop a plan. It's simple. It's horrifying. It's going to work. The bribery. Narses takes bags of gold into the Hippodrome. Finds the blue faction leaders. Reminds them of something crucial. The blues have always been loyal to Justinian and Theodora. Remember when Theodora was a child, begging in the arena, and the blues showed mercy? This is the same blues and greens alliance that's rebelling. But Hypatius, the rival emperor being crowned? He's got green faction support. If Hypatius wins, the greens will dominate the next reign. The blues will lose power, lose imperial favor, lose everything. Narses offers gold. Imperial gratitude. Promises of future favor if they abandon the rebellion. The blue faction leaders take the gold. Start whispering to their followers. Start moving toward the exits. While Narses is bribing the blues, Belisarius is positioning troops. All the exits from the Hippodrome are being quietly blocked. Gates locked. Passages filled with soldiers. The mob inside, maybe 50,000 people, all packed into the stadium, celebrating Hypatius's coronation, doesn't notice immediately. They're too busy chanting, celebrating what they think is victory. Then the blues start leaving. Confusion spreads. What's happening? Where are they going? And then Belisarius's troops enter the Hippodrome. From multiple entrances. Weapons drawn. The crowd realizes, this isn't negotiation. This is massacre. The slaughter. What happens next is one of the worst massacres in Byzantine history. The troops advance in formation. The crowd panics, tries to flee, but the exits are blocked. They're trapped in the Hippodrome, the same arena where Theodora performed decades earlier. The soldiers don't discriminate. They kill everyone they can reach. Men, women, anyone in the Hippodrome gets cut down. Swords, spears, axes. The mob is unarmed, panicked, crushed against the walls and gates. The killing lasts for hours. The ancient sources give varying numbers: 30,000 dead, 40,000, 50,000. The exact count is impossible, but the scale is clear. This is genocide. This is terror as policy. The Hippodrome floor, the same sawdust and sand where Theodora performed with geese, is soaked with blood. Bodies pile up. The screaming is audible across Constantinople. The aftermath. When it's over, when the soldiers finally stop killing, the Hippodrome is a charnel house. The bodies are piled so high they have to be removed with carts. It takes days to clear the dead. Hypatius, the rival emperor, is captured alive. Brought before Justinian. Executed immediately. His body is thrown into the sea. The rebellion is over. Completely. Brutally. Definitively. No one will dare rebel against Justinian and Theodora again. The message is clear: question our authority, and we will kill tens of thousands without hesitation. The irony: Theodora saved the empire by ordering a massacre in the Hippodrome, the place where she was humiliated as a child, the place where she performed degradation for coins, the place that symbolizes everything she escaped. And now it's the site of her greatest triumph. 30,000 dead to preserve her throne. The little girl who begged for charity in the arena became the empress who filled it with corpses. This is power. Not the sanitized version. Not the romantic version. The real version: survival through ruthlessness. Protection through terror. Victory through mass murder. Theodora stands in the palace, overlooking the burning city. She's won. The empire is saved. Her position is secure. And she's absolutely covered in blood. Metaphorically. Politically. Morally. Does she feel guilt? Regret? Triumph? The sources don't tell us. Theodora's interior life remains unknowable. All we see are her actions. And her actions say she would rather kill 50,000 than lose the purple. Royal purple truly is the noblest shroud. After the Nika riots, after the massacre, after the empire is secured through blood and terror, Theodora does something that confuses everyone. She starts protecting the powerless. The empress with secret dungeons becomes the empress with women's shelters. The woman who disappeared aristocrats becomes the patron of prostitutes and rape victims. This is the contradiction at the heart of Theodora. And it's about to get deeper. The convent of repentance. Theodora establishes a monastery on the Asian shore of the Bosphorus. It's called the Convent of Repentance, metanoia in Greek. But it's not a normal monastery. It's specifically for former prostitutes. Women who want to leave sex work, who want refuge, safety, a chance at a different life. Theodora funds it generously, provides food, clothing, resources. The women are taught to read, to pray, to support themselves through textile work or other respectable labor. They're given a chance to reform, to escape the cycles of poverty and exploitation that Theodora herself escaped only through extraordinary luck and ruthlessness. This is revolutionary. Byzantine society has no social services, no safety nets. Prostitutes who age out or get sick or want to leave the trade have zero options. They die in poverty or continue working until they die of disease or violence. Theodora is creating an alternative, an exit path. And she's doing it using imperial resources, which means she's redirecting the empire's wealth toward women society considers worthless. The controversy. But here's the dark side. Not all the women want to be saved. Sources, particularly hostile sources, report that Theodora's agents raid brothels. Liberate women forcibly. Bring them to the convent of repentance whether they consent or not. And some women, facing the prospect of being locked in a monastery for life, choose suicide instead. There are reports of women throwing themselves from the convent windows into the Bosphorus rather than submit to reformation. Is this rescue or imprisonment? Liberation or a different kind of exploitation? Theodora probably sees it as rescue. She escaped sex work, so obviously escaping is better than staying. The idea that some women might choose sex work, might prefer independence and income to the constrained life of a monastery, doesn't seem to occur to her. Or if it does, she doesn't care. She's saving them from the life she lived, whether they want to be saved or not. Anti-trafficking legislation. Theodora pushes Justinian to pass laws against pimps and traffickers. Byzantine law already has some prohibitions, but enforcement is minimal. Theodora strengthens them. New laws. Pimps can be prosecuted and their property confiscated. Parents who sell daughters into prostitution can be punished. Brothel owners must release women who want to leave. Women forced into prostitution can seek refuge in churches without being returned to their pimps. These are significant reforms. Not perfectly enforced, law enforcement in Byzantium is inconsistent at best. But they represent a shift in how prostitution is legally framed, from inevitable vice to exploitable crime. Protection of rape victims. Theodora also advocates for rape victims. Byzantine law treats rape primarily as a property crime. You've damaged another man's property, his wife or daughter. Penalties depend on the victim's social status. Raping a slave? Minimal punishment. Raping an aristocrat's wife? Death or exile. Theodora pushes for harsher penalties across the board. She argues, radically for her time, that rape is a crime against the woman herself, not just against her male relatives. She provides resources for rape victims, shelter in her women's facilities, legal advocates, financial support if they've been cast out by families who blame them for being violated. This is personal. Theodora survived as a woman in a world where sexual violence was routine and unpunished. She knows what it means to be vulnerable, to be prey, to have no legal recourse. Now she has power, and she's using it to protect women who have none. The complexity. But, and this is crucial, Theodora's charity isn't purely altruistic. Every woman she rescues owes her. Every prostitute who finds refuge in her convent of repentance becomes part of her network. They're loyal. They're grateful. And gratitude is a form of power. Theodora is building a base of support independent of aristocratic men. She's creating networks that cut across class lines, that give her eyes and ears in places imperial spies can't reach. The women she saves become informants, allies, extensions of her shadow state. So, is she genuinely compassionate? Or ruthlessly pragmatic? Both. Always both with Theodora. She saves women from trafficking and runs secret prisons simultaneously. She protects rape victims and disappears political enemies. She's brutal to the powerful and protective to the powerless. And maybe that's the most honest expression of power there is. You protect those who can't threaten you while crushing those who can. You build loyalty through charity and enforce it through terror. Theodora is running a protection racket on an imperial scale. And it's working. While Theodora is building her shadow state and her women's shelters, while she's disappearing enemies and rescuing prostitutes, she's also fighting a religious war. A quiet war. A theological war that's actually about power. Because in Byzantium, theology is politics. And Theodora is on the losing side. The theological battlefield. The Christian Church in the 6th century is fractured over a question that seems abstract but has enormous political implications. What was Christ's nature? The Orthodox position, established at the Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE, Christ has two natures, divine and human, united in one person. The Monophysite position, Theodora's position, Christ has one nature, purely divine. This sounds like academic hair-splitting. It's not. It's about power. The Chalcedonian Orthodox position is the official doctrine of Constantinople, supported by the emperor, enforced by law. Monophysites are technically heretics. But the Monophysites are strong in the eastern provinces, Egypt, Syria, Armenia. These provinces are economically crucial, militarily important. If they rebel over religious differences, the empire fractures. Justinian supports Chalcedonian orthodoxy. He's a theological conservative, devoted to official church doctrine. Theodora supports Monophysitism. The same Monophysites who sheltered her in Alexandria when she was destitute, who gave her community and protection when she had nothing. The secret chapel. Theodora maintains a Monophysite chapel in the Great Palace. Secret. Hidden from official church authorities. She shelters Monophysite bishops there, men who are wanted by the Orthodox establishment, who should be arrested and exiled for heresy. They live in the palace, right under Justinian's nose, protected by Theodora. She hosts theological debates, provides funding for Monophysite monasteries in the eastern provinces, uses her influence to protect heretical clergy from prosecution. This is extraordinary. The empress is harboring heretics in the imperial palace, while her husband enforces orthodoxy. How does this work? How does Justinian not know? Or does he know and allow it? The political utility. Here's the genius of Theodora and Justinian's theological split. It's partly genuine, partly performance. Justinian can appeal to Orthodox constituencies, Constantinople, Greece, the church establishment, by enforcing Orthodox doctrine. Theodora can appeal to Monophysite constituencies, Egypt, Syria, eastern provinces, by protecting their clergy and supporting their doctrine. This way, the empire appeals to both sides simultaneously. It's a good cop/bad cop routine on a theological scale. But for Theodora, it's also personal. She genuinely has Monophysite sympathies, developed during her conversion in Alexandria. Whether the belief is authentic or strategic, probably both, she commits to it completely. She becomes the Monophysite empress, their patron, their protector in a hostile empire. The church politics. Theodora influences church appointments. When Orthodox patriarchs retire or die, she pushes for candidates sympathetic to Monophysites. She can't install full Monophysites, that would be too radical, but she can influence the selection toward moderates. She hosts theological conferences trying to find compromise positions between Chalcedonian and Monophysite doctrines. Some are genuine attempts at reconciliation. Others are stalling tactics, buying time for her protected heretics. She corresponds with popes, with Eastern patriarchs, with theologians across the Christian world. She's conducting her own foreign policy through religious channels. And it's working. The eastern provinces remain, mostly, loyal despite theological differences. Egypt and Syria don't rebel. Theodora's religious diplomacy is holding the empire together where military force would trigger revolt. The paradox of sainthood. Here's the beautiful irony. The Orthodox Church, which considers Theodora a heretic, doesn't canonize her. But the Monophysite churches do. Saint Theodora. The former prostitute becomes a saint in multiple Christian traditions. She's venerated. Icons are painted of her. Prayers are addressed to her. The transformation is complete, from geese performer to saint, from legally non-human to literally holy. But she achieves sainthood precisely by being a heretic, by supporting the wrong theological position, by protecting clergy that official Constantinople considers dangerous. She's a saint to the people she protected and a villain to the establishment she defied. which is probably exactly how she'd want it. June 548 c. Theodora is dying. The sources suggest cancer, a long, wasting illness that takes months to kill her. She's in her late 40s or early 50s. She's been empress for 21 years. And she's leaving Justinian alone. The final illness. Theodora is in the imperial bedchamber. The same palace where she ran her shadow state, hosted Monophysite bishops, planned the Nika riots massacre. Now she's too weak to rise. Byzantine medicine can do nothing. Physicians try prayer, herbal remedies, bloodletting. Nothing works. The disease, whatever it is consuming her. But even bedridden, she's conducting business. Receiving reports from her spies. Giving final instructions to her agents. Ensuring that her networks will survive her death. She's particularly concerned about the Monophysite bishops she's been protecting. Will Justinian maintain her policy? Or will he prosecute them once she's gone? She extracts promises. Makes Justinian swear to continue protecting her clergy. Secures positions for her allies in government and church. She's dying, but she's still playing chess. Justinian's grief. Justinian is devastated. This awkward, socially inept emperor who fell obsessively in love with a prostitute 30 years ago is watching her die. And he's helpless. He sits beside her bed for hours. Holds her hand. Prays. Begs God to take him instead. The man who reformed Roman law, who reconquered half the Mediterranean, who built the Hagia Sophia, he can't save his wife. Sources describe him as almost catatonic with grief, refusing to accept she's dying, insisting she'll recover, until finally, she's too weak to speak. June 28, 548 CE. Evening. Theodora dies. The sources don't record her last words, don't describe her final moments. She dies in the imperial bedchamber, probably with Justinian beside her, and then she's gone. The woman who survived the Hippodrome, the theaters, abandonment in Alexandria, assassination attempts, the Nika riots, she's killed by disease. Something invisible. Something that doesn't care about power or purple or political genius. She dies in imperial purple, exactly as she said she would. The noblest shroud. The funeral. The funeral is massive. Byzantine emperors and empresses get state funerals on a scale that's almost unimaginable. Processions through Constantinople. The entire court in mourning. Churches draped in black. Chanting that lasts for days. Theodora is buried in the Church of the Holy Apostles, the imperial mausoleum. The same church where Constantine and other emperors are entombed. She's buried with full honors as Augusta, equal to any emperor. The former prostitute is laid to rest among Roman emperors. The woman legally classified as infames is buried in sacred ground. The transformation is complete and permanent. Justinian after Theodora. Justinian lives another 17 years after Theodora's death. But he's never the same. Sources describe him as increasingly isolated, paranoid, erratic. He makes poor decisions. His later military campaigns fail. His theological policies become more extreme and less effective. The partnership that made his reign successful is broken. He was the visionary, she was the enforcer. He dreamed, she executed. Without her, he's incomplete. He never remarries. Never even takes a mistress. For 17 years, until his death in 565 CE, he remains alone. Obsessively devoted to the memory of the wife he rewrote laws to marry. The competing legacies. After Theodora's death, two completely contradictory narratives emerge. The orthodox/hostile tradition, Theodora as demon whore. Procopius's Secret History is the extreme version, claiming she was a nymphomaniac who corrupted Justinian through demonic sexuality, that she was cruel beyond measure, that she ran torture chambers and lived in sin. This tradition emphasizes the geese, the prostitution, the secret police, the disappearances, the heresy, everything that makes her seem monstrous. The Monophysite/sympathetic tradition, Saint Theodora, pious Christian who protected the faithful, wise empress who saved the empire during the Nika riots, charitable patron who rescued countless women from exploitation. This tradition emphasizes the convent of repentance, the protection of rape victims, the religious devotion, the partnership with Justinian, everything that makes her seem saintly. Both traditions are propaganda. Both are true. Both are false. The unknowable woman. Who was Theodora really? We'll never know. The sources are too contradictory, too biased, too distant from her interior life. Was she a survivor doing whatever necessary to escape poverty and maintain power? Was she a ruthless tyrant who disappeared enemies and ran secret prisons? Was she a charitable patron who protected vulnerable women? Was she a religious heretic who undermined imperial orthodoxy? Was she genuinely in love with Justinian? Probably. Was she also using him for power? Probably. All of it. Simultaneously. Contradictory and consistent. Human. The final question. 1,500 years later, we're still arguing about Theodora. Saint or whore? Savior or tyrant? Victim or villain? Maybe the question itself is the answer. Maybe Theodora's genius was making herself impossible to categorize. Making sure that whether you love her or hate her, condemn her or venerate her, you have to acknowledge her. You have to say her name. She rose from the Hippodrome to the throne. From geese performer to empress. From infames to Augusta. From powerless to the most powerful woman in the world. She changed laws. Saved an empire. Protected thousands. Destroyed hundreds. Built churches and ran dungeons. Was saint and sinner, often in the same afternoon. And she did it all while knowing that history, written by men for men to serve male power, would try to erase her or reduce her to a cautionary tale. She made herself unerasable, unreducible, unforgettable. Royal purple was indeed the noblest shroud. And Theodora wore it until death, exactly as she promised. Welcome to the Forbidden Archives. This is the woman they didn't want you to know. The prostitute who became a saint. The actress who saved an empire. The whore who wore the purple. Theodora. Say her name.